Mark Pearson, Executive and Artistic Director of the College Light Opera Company, coming to you from the West Falmouth Library. Open now for curbside pickup. Welcome to Second Stage, a week in review of work being done by our talented orchestra members. Second Stage is made possible by a generous gift from Caroline and Jim Lloyd. Let's see what the Highfield Philharmonic was up to this week.
Hi, my name is Zach Manlapid, and I'm the Associate Conductor for the 2020 Digital Clock season. For this week's orchestra masterclass, they got to work with Maestro Andrew Crust on a selection of orchestral and musical theater excerpts. Maestro Crust works as the Assistant Conductor for the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra and is the newly appointed Music Director of the Lima Symphony Orchestra. On this week's episode of Second Stage, you will see even more of our supremely talented orchestra members featured this week, including some of the excerpts that they were assigned to play for this week's masterclass.
I thought it sounded really nice. This excerpt it's hard over Zoom to hear the difference between piano and forte. It always is. I've heard people play this excerpt over Zoom before. It's really good. It's really clean. As I said, it's Zoom. You can't hear the dynamic nuances really, and that's just going to be Zoom. So if we're going back through my sort of criteria on rhythm was very good. There were 3 places that just for me had micro rushes happening, very small. So just very, very small, but you have to know that everybody is tapping their foot in these auditions and thinking like a metronome and making these mental notes of the smallest deviations. Why is this one an excerpt? I think because Mozart is always extremely hard and exposed, and the style is very important and the intonation is very important. But for this one, also the bow control. And I think you did a very good job with that. I would try and bring out the fortes more, those little explosions, which kind of make that opera happen and be full of energy. But otherwise, I think this is great. Would you be willing to play it for us live a little bit? We'll kind of see how this goes. Yeah, great. Did you all feel that was much more stable? The original one was quite stable, but this was very, very solid. Again, I can't, I can't tell the difference between piano and forte, but I know that is Zoom, because I know this excerpt. In 22 and 23, those sforzando piano moments again, I was kind of hearing, and this might just be Zoom, but I was kind of hearing the A naturals as being accented. Dee-dum, dee-dum, rather than the opposite way around. And also try lengthening the A naturals just a little bit. I know it's Mozart, it shouldn't be full value. What if you connected the A natural to the next B flat? How would that sound? Can you just try that from the sforzandos? Yeah, it's that last A natural that sometimes gets clipped because you're ready to change the bow stroke and get ready for that B flat. So as long as that still has, I always try and imagine that, you're singing and you have it's opera. So you have to have a word that fits in that note. And if it's somehow clipped, then it wouldn't sound natural if you've got a syllable that you're trying to pronounce. Yeah, and I really like how you did the sforzando pianos, which were very front, like a little burst of energy. You could also kind of, kind of ease into it, but that's not exactly right for this style. I think you handled those very well. Also, when you're listening to 30, 40, 50, 70 violinists in an audition, what is the role of personality and musicality and telling a story and sticking out? So for me, like, there are going to be 20 people who are practically perfect with their intonation and rhythm, and especially at like a Vancouver Symphony audition. So then the next thing becomes: are they good musicians? Are they telling a story? Are they do they understand the character? So yeah, we get bogged down in little technical things, but in the end, we're making music. But I will tell you, if your character and your style is better than your rhythm, you won't go on. So that all that foundation has to be there at the very beginning. Yeah, nice job. The first thing I noticed, the first thing I'm thinking, loving this symphony so much when I hear this excerpt, is I'm hearing the orchestra at the beginning, and the pulse wasn't consistent through those long tied notes. And so I when you're playing that, are you physically hearing a timpani in your head? It sounds fantastic. The legato is great. Intonation was solid. Yeah, the very beginning, it also, it might be Zoom, but it was kind of a kind of an explosion. I'm exaggerating, but what if it's more of a just an exhale? So can you try it once for us live and think, just really be hearing that timpani and give each 16th note full weight. Yeah, nice. That was better. Do you do you use a metronome when you practice this one? Yeah, I would definitely keep doing that because it's still just a little bit pushing, and I'm not sure what else. You know, that's just super critical for this one. So let's move to Robert Paddock. Yeah, very nice. Very nice. I thought your rhythm within your own tempo was very solid. Um, but you might have, again, you might have someone stop you and say, can you try a little faster? When you go away from the melody and now you're just eighth notes. When you start the D naturals, are those different from the more melodic notes? And does that start on the second eighth note because the first D is finishing the phrase? Or does it start right away on the downbeat? Suddenly you're motor now, you know, so we need to kind of decide. And to me, it wasn't different enough. So the first one needs to be melodic and the second one needs to just be motoric, and really land super solid on that. And then the fortissimo can be a much bigger change. Can you try it for us live and just take it up just a couple notches tempo wise? Yeah, and by the way, I liked your original tempo a lot. It's just always good to go out of your comfort zone. I guess the tempo for anything, for me, the way I choose it depends on the space that you're in. But really, you have to be able to hear every note in a very, again, I go back to opera, like if you were singing a syllable on these words. Of course, in this opera, I don't think there's any moment where someone's singing that melody with a syllable on every single. I don't think that happens. It is its own musical thing. But in a case in an opera overture where it is from an aria, if you take a tempo that's unsingable, the conductor or opera coach, or, you know, vocal coach, they're going to know that immediately. They're going to think, well, you can't sing that, so how could you, you know, shouldn't be playing it that way. But I did like your first tempo a lot. Really nice. Yeah, so Brahms is my favorite, and it's so challenging for so many reasons. The tone is so important in this one, obviously, and style, but it's also full of traps. Like at the very end, there are all of those little quarter rests, and as I saw those coming, I was immediately thinking, is he going to rush through those or not? You know, because one of the things that happens a lot in auditions is rests. People rush through them and they're not listening to the orchestra during that moment. But you did not do that at the end, which is very nice. And you were at the ends of phrases. It was very nice. You were vibrating through those pauses. The beginning, though, had some rushing. And if you can already hear that, already in your head, hear those staccato eighth notes sort of driving you. And I think you can lean on the big beats a little bit more with your vibrato. A little more accents and weight, and that'll give you sort of more of an anchor point. I liked the dynamic contrast that you had. I think all of that low legato stuff can somehow even be richer, a warmer vibrato, and then a big contrast. And the trick is in 79, 80, 81, ya da 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 dee, that first note in 81, it's kind of like the Mozart. Do you finish the phrase and then start the more marcato? I think that C sharp has to be connected to the last phrase. Would you want to play it for us since you got your axe there? Yeah, I definitely sensed that you were aware of not rushing at the beginning there this time. I liked also you were doing the emphasis I was talking about. I thought this is good. Let's move on. Very nice. I liked the difference when he goes to allmählich lebhafter, suddenly livelier or lighter. The first bit is very free, right? The conductor is always going to be following the horn player, but then once you get to volles Zeitmaß, it's more sort of in time, which I definitely felt from you at the beginning, right? It's sort of just shimmering quiet strings. Yeah. And then I could definitely tell that you're hearing after the orchestra plays those a couple of chords, right? So always hear what's going on in the orchestra, because the people out there can tell if you're playing the soundtrack in your head. But I think horn players know this 2 minutes very, very well. There are moments where you know what's in the score and you want to be accurate to the score, but there are these traditions that have been built up over the decades. And if you go away from that tradition, you're showing that you don't know traditions. But if you go with the score, you're showing you know the score. So it's like it really depends on who's in the audience and what they're looking for. And Strauss was so specific, like all those guys, Mahler and Schoenberg and Stravinsky, like they practically went to the point where they didn't even want you to interpret their music. They just wanted you to realize their music. Like, don't mess around with it. And I don't know if you all have seen Strauss conducting. It's wild. I think this piece is up as well as some others. He's completely not moving a muscle, not sweating at all, completely disinterested, kind of looking at his watch. Meanwhile, it's this huge fortissimo orchestra sound, and he couldn't be bothered to even have any emotion, you know. But it's all there in the music. Absolutely. Would you play it for us?
Sure.
Try, just for fun, forget about performance practice, and let the beginning be more fantasy, out of time a little bit. And, you know, actually, if we are going with the score, he doesn't write allmählich lebhafter until a little bit into the phrase, like gradually livelier. So kind of start it in a sort of more sedate way, and then maybe don't push forward until those accents start to happen. I liked that. Yeah. How about the second phrase? Volles Zeitmaß. Yeah, and that's interesting that he doesn't accent the first note, right? Just this G and then the final C. Not sure why that little detail. Can you try the beginning once more and separate the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 So 5 notes to the E, and then kind of separate a little bit before that next G. Try and create 2 distinct phrases. Yeah. Beam bam, and I think more accent on those 2 would be helpful as well. You could talk about this excerpt for centuries, even though it's just a few short notes. But I think let's move on maybe to the Beethoven 9. Very nice. That's such a great excerpt because it has solo, it has really low, jumping up and down. This is great though. Yeah. So in that one solo bar with the 16th notes, generally more liberties are allowed there, right? You took a little time at the end. One of the things I really like about all your playing is that the tempo and the pulse is really solid. I never feel like you're pushing or pulling in the wrong places. So bravo with that. This one, obviously, the low notes seems to me to be the hardest to really make them speak in tune. And it would give me horn is crazy. I used to play it actually in high school. And I remember when I figured out that I could play an entire scale with one fingering. It's like, there's something wrong with this instrument. The notes are too close together. It's so difficult. But this is really good. Would you mind playing it for us? Just 2 things I want to note. That solo bar, how do you make it so that as soon as you hit that A flat, it's suddenly a solo? It's separated from what came before in your tone and your dynamics. Because that didn't happen very often in his symphonies, a horn solo. There are some very nice moments, and they're all excerpts, of course. Just to make it clear that now something has changed. But then also those notes at 85, really from the beginning, that to me is the hardest thing, to really keep the intonation and the character, and it's very calm and serene. And maybe you could make, it might be Zoom, but less emphasis when you tongue each of them and have it be a very light tongue, almost like there's just barely interrupting the airflow at all, almost organ-like, with no vibrato, you know, as you were doing, very sort of serene. This is hard. I see why this is an excerpt. It's got a lot going on. I want to jump to the next one so we have time. So thank you, Oved.
Thank you.
Thank you for playing. Up next for our last victim, we have Megan. It's a great solo. So I'm trying to remember, we just did this, but in the orchestra, there's not much happening. It's pretty accompanied, like, yeah, it's very open and free.
Yeah.
So I think in that case, maybe you can take even more liberties with the time, and really make it, you know, improvisatory is sort of the style that you would hear people playing on the street, flamenco guitar, that kind of thing, really just kind of moving at a whim. I think you can the pushing forward was good, but sometimes the pulling back wasn't that emphatic, and maybe you can lean on notes a little bit longer. Yeah, can you try it one more time and just like think about the structure, because if you get lost in the details, we don't sort of know where the high point is. So for you, where is the high point where everything is leading to?
I think it's the last measure of the second line on the low D after you have the 6 tuplets. That's kind of where I'm going to, I think.
It makes sense because you have triplets, then sixteenths, and then quintuplets, and then sextuplets for the very highest note, right? So it's all sort of leading in that direction. So within that larger structure, you know, don't let each little flourish be its own entity. Let it all be sort of growing towards that. And then the little details, like the first accent that is written in the second measure of the second bar, that can be a little bit more emphatic. This is like full of story to me, right? But I would definitely either create your own fantasy of what this is, or you know, research literally what's happening. And sometimes it's written in a score, like Daphnis and Chloe, Suite Number 2. He's written in kind of what's going on stage, or sometimes Stravinsky and Firebird. But to me, this is like a flamenco dancer, if I'm just making something up, has just appeared, and everyone kind of gets quiet and the solo is happening, right? It's the moment to, it's very flirtatious and sensual and passionate and kind of whimsical, right? It's just happening in the spur of the moment. I think it needs a little more charisma, it needs a little more of that Spanish fire, you know what I mean? Yeah. So rest on those low notes a little bit more, give a little more emphasis to the accents. And then sometimes I think you can add tenuto lines for emphasis. For example, the top of some of these runs, like the second measure of the second line, just a little bit of weight on some of these things. It seems a little too hurried. Yeah, you're the center of attention. Everyone's looking at you. They're hanging on every single note. Can you try it once more? Just think about spreading things out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was the best one yet. It had a lot of character and had direction. And I mean, for all of you, I would absolutely plan out each excerpt, you know, where's the high point? Where are within that high point, what are the other structures? Oftentimes we don't think about, I'm always thinking about that as a conductor. Every piece has one climax. And when you're doing Mahler, these huge epic long movements, that's like climax after climax, there's actually only one main climax. So you need to figure out where is that to keep all of the other stuff a little bit in reserve. Very nice. I love the tone and intonation and the simplicity of it, because it is sort of folk music after all. But you know, a lot of people think this is like a going home, an American spiritual,
Hmm.
but it's not really, right? It's a Czech folk melody,
Yeah.
and he was trying to you know, imitate sort of American, what he thought of as American sounds. I don't think he knew that much about African American spirituals or certainly didn't know anything about Native American music,
Hmm.
but he was in his own European way trying to figure out what America sounded like. But in fact, it's really just a Czech melody. Obviously, this is very free. And when I conduct this, I don't give a lot of indications, because whenever there's a big famous solo, if you go in there and try and talk about it, likely that soloist has been playing this and has thought about this way more than even if you've been conducting it your whole life, because it's like an excerpt that you've done forever. But you know, there are big variances. Some people take huge amounts of time and it's very static and out of time. Some people play it very simply like a folk melody. I kind of like the simplicity and the flow that you brought to it. If you do too slow, it's really just out of time. It has no tempo anymore. But one thing, and again, this might be Zoom, is just the big differences in dynamics. So that pianissimo in the second bar is such a special moment in the strings, to really keep something in reserve there. And then the high point with that forte, da, da, dee, da, da, dee. You can kind of wait on the high note. You know, I think if anything in your playing, you could, it's same thing for the defaya, just a little bit more rubato and freedom. Breezy, it's simple, it sounds lovely, but can you change now and imagine you're 95 years old and you're the village elder and you're going to sing this song that you've learned since you were 1 year old, and it's your last time you might ever sing it to anyone. Really nice. Yeah, I felt that there was more storytelling happening there. And something like this, it's always great to kind of come up with an idea. And, you know, for me, I think this was nostalgia for him. He really loved, I guess, being in Iowa and New York, but he really missed his homeland at the same time. And for me, this is him sort of remembering. And so it's nice to have that image of somebody teaching people about the past, you know, and really every single note is important. There's nothing that's just sort of thrown away. So that's one approach. But there's also the like casual grandma washing the dishes, singing a melody approach, you know, where it's sort of just not that thought out at all.
Second Stage is part of our larger series, Digital Clock. Digital Clock is made possible by a generous gift from Phil and Liz Gross. If you'd like to learn more about our programming or how you can become a supporter, visit us at collegelight.operacompany.com. Tune in next week for another episode of Second Stage.